Okay guys, let's talk tarot for a little while today. I'll just take you through a few considerations that I tend to make once I've laid out a spread. I'm just going to kind of show you what I will go through. Firstly, I like to just let my intuition absorb as I look over the spread as a whole. People do things differently, and that is something that I always stress when I'm giving a lesson, so don't panic if what I'm saying doesn't seem to align itself with what you would want to do or what you're planning on doing or how you've been practicing it or whatever. I'm just giving you some considerations that you might have overlooked or might wish to include. But what I tend to do is just get a feel for what my intuition is telling me first of all before I break down any of my considerations with regard to the suit or the element or the numbers, whatever it is. So what I would say first of all with looking at this spread is that it immediately gives off a very masculine energy. There's lots of wands, which I can see straight away. There's lots of sort of active and strong looking men in there. Obviously masculine and feminine energy does not pertain to gender, but when I'm looking at it from an intuitive perspective and just giving myself a chance to absorb the images as a whole, it paints somewhat of a portrait. And of course, with things like the knight, you're really looking at masculine attributes. You're looking at things like tenacity and go-getting kind of feeling, ambition, and that kind of stuff, assertiveness. So I'm getting that masculine feel. And I'm also getting a feel that there's a lot of movement here. There's a lot of high octane energy, but there are also maybe some elements of frustration and some needs for healing, maybe a need to pause and reflect. There could be some stress. I'm getting kind of a stressed energy. I'm getting a feeling potentially of a client who's at quite an ambitious stage in their life. There might be a lot of forward motion, but there also might be quite a lot of need for clarification and relaxation and that kind of thing. Obviously, this is just a reading spread that I've laid out in no particular order to show you what kind of things I would consider. I'm not doing this for a client, and according to the client's notes and case history and their personality and the energy that I tapped into, my observations might be different. So I don't want you to think for a second that I only read the cards. I do much more than that, but for the purposes of this example, I would intuitively read those things from it. But obviously these things change when a client becomes involved and when you actually start tapping into their energy and their specific issues. The next thing I would take a look at is how many cards from the same suit have we got. I tend to find that if there are anywhere of in the region of 4 major arcana cards or over, I tend to feel that it's quite a transitional and significant time in the client's life. That's how I tend to look at it. So first of all, I always look how many major arcana cards there are. There are 3 in this one, so that would be maybe my first consideration. I've noticed that there are predominantly this spread, is ruled by the element of fire. There are 4 cards from the suit of wands, and they actually make quite a nice, neat little loop actually through. Taking a look at the card positions and how many cards from each suit are kind of in alignment with each other or making a nice little shape with each other, that can be quite helpful too if that's how you want to do it. But what I also notice with this particular spread is that there are lots of court cards. We've got a page of cups, a page of wands, a knight of wands, and a knight of swords. So there's lots of court cards there. The way I read court cards is I think of them as being about self-realization and about shifts according to the personality, evolution as an individual, really finding yourself, really getting a grip on what you're after, and kind of making peace with who you are and any necessary transition that might take place to achieve that. So that's kind of how I see it. So I would probably read this spread as being quite a lot to do with individual transition, with understanding who the client is, self-realization, self-knowledge, maybe letting go of old ideals and really stepping into their personal power. That's how I take it. I also sometimes look at the number of reversals in a spread. There are only 2 reversals in this spread. Sometimes you'll find that there is spreads where it's nearly all reversals, and dependent upon how you read reversals, that will or will not be significant to you. I do have a video in my trainee tarot course on reversals if you wanted to go back and take a look at that, if you're kind of unsure or if you don't work with reversals and you're thinking of working with reversals. I've just noticed there are actually 3. The core card itself is reversed. Then I would take a look at the masculine and feminine according to the elements. Now, when I first turn a spread over, I do like to get that intuitive feel. And what I do when I'm looking for whether or not there's an overtly masculine or overtly feminine energy is I will just read intuitively. I'll just let the energies take over, and I'll make the decision based on that, based on my feeling. But then what I will do out of interest is I'll normally take a look at exactly how many cards from the masculine and from the feminine suits are present. Swords are masculine and wands are masculine. Pentacles, of which there are none in this spread, are feminine, and so are cups. So all in all, you've got a fairly masculine spread there. So it did go with what I intuitively felt. However, sometimes you will find yourself feeling that a spread has much more of a feminine slant in terms of energy, or masculine slant, and it won't line up with what's actually on the table in terms of the elements and the suits. But that doesn't matter. It's really about going from feeling, to be honest with you. And I've met several very proficient tarot readers who feel that identifying pentacles and cups as pertaining to feminine energies and swords and wands pertaining to masculine doesn't actually work for them. They actually like to break the cards down individually into feminine and masculine themes or energies. So that's quite interesting. And also you might have different ways of reading the major arcana. For example, you might feel that the star has quite a feminine energy to it, the energies of receptivity and passivity and healing and intuition. And the devil maybe might have a more masculine energy to it, or the fool, in fact, might have more masculine energies. They'll be more about breaking bondage and moving forward and spontaneity, risk-taking, adventure, that kind of thing. Recklessness to an extent too. So, you know, you might have different feelings about the major arcana cards depending on what your specific perception is. Some people might choose to look at colour depending on the deck that you're using and whether or not you have any interest in things like chromotherapy. I have one tarot spread for sale on my shop which actually taps into the colours in the spread and uses them as the direction for what kind of guidance to give. So I'm kind of interested in chromotherapy myself, and sometimes I will notice that there are certain colours coming through. For example, I might notice that there are a hell of a lot of cards which are quite dark or quite black or have a lot of black and white to them, or I might notice that there's a massive outpouring of yellow in the spread, and it might sort of strike me when I stand back and I'll think, wow, this is quite a bright sunny looking spread, there's quite a lot of sunny cards there. So that's something that you might want to consider. Numbers are a good thing to consider. In the trainee tarot course, there's a video where I talk about the meanings of the numbers in tarot. And sometimes I find that there are like 3 cards that are all the number 5, or there'll be a row of 3 that are the number 7 or whatever. And I do tend to let that consideration kind of wash over me because I think that can be quite interesting too. One of the very first videos that I did on the Four Queens YouTube channel was about reading direction in spreads. And what I mean by that is that sometimes it can be quite interesting to look at the direction in which the action is taking place. So for example, the Knight of Swords seems to be running towards the Fool. So that might be about, potentially, according to the position in the spread of course, it could be about somebody who's very tenacious and very involved with what they want to get out of a situation and very black and white on their thoughts about that situation. It could be about their need to move towards this more spontaneous, this more freewheeling, this more relaxed sense of being, where they are not too rigid in their thought pattern and where they allow for alternatives. So that's kind of like how you would read direction. I'm just trying to see if there's another example. So for example, up here you've got the 10 of Wands, and then beneath you've got these wands that seem to be sort of flying away from the situation that's going on in the 10 of Wands. So that could be that there is a burden, or there is kind of a feeling of being repressed or submitting to something that's quite miserable. And then there's this high octane action card, which is suggesting that you need to move away from this burden, you need to move away from this sense of repression and put your energy into something more enjoyable and exciting. And then you could even take that and notice that it moves into the direction of the Knight of Wands. So that could be a suggestion that the client actually needs to move away from, you know, the drudgery of whatever they're currently doing and move into creative endeavour. So direction in a spread is very useful for some people, and some people really enjoy it. Other people don't enjoy it so much. For me, I just allow intuition to guide me. Sometimes I'll see some direction happening, some movement happening in the spread, and I'll decide that it's really significant, and at other times it doesn't really come up. But when I'm kind of going over a spread intuitively, I do sometimes get a feel for whether there's lots of movement or whether it's quite still and stagnant. And that gives me a snapshot, in a sense, of what's going on in the client's psyche at the time of the reading. So I will sometimes mention that as well. But like I said, it's all about intuition. Let intuition guide you. If you notice something and then you don't feel it's necessarily important in terms of the overall spread, you don't need to mention it. You don't need to give it any more thought than that. Just be expansive, be exploratory, and try and look in the hidden places for things you wouldn't otherwise have picked up. And then from there, your intuition will tell you whether or not it's really significant. I hope this little lesson has been helpful to you. Much love and blessed be.